As always, I am Bueller. This is another creator interview. Let's stop right there because Sal, creator interview. Everyone knows you from ComicPop, the creator, the content creator, all that stuff. But there's a new title being added to your name, comic book creator.
Yes.
And that's what we're here to talk about. So let's talk about it right now. The Terminator, you're on the book, man. How does that feel?
It feels unreal, surreal, feels amazing. All the other words that might have real in the title. I'm thrilled, man. And it is something that I never imagined I'd be affiliated with, but something that I also, whenever it was in this scenario, when it was possible, I went for it because I was like, I bleed oil. I love Terminator. I am a huge effing fan of that franchise. And, well, most of the franchise. And I've always wanted to when I say I'm a nerd about it, like I've written scripts, I've written ideas, like I've drawn the Terminator 1,000 times. And I was a kid, I had like this amazing Terminator action figure from T2 that had this like rubber on the middle, so he had like punching action. Just okay. And I had that guy until his arm broke off, and I had the arm somewhere, and I would just, because of course it's like memorabilia. Yeah. But yeah, no, I've always wanted to do the story, and or at least I wanted to be in this world, and I've always wanted to tell stories. And now that I've been given an opportunity to actually do it, it's just like I can't even believe it.
So you sought this out. You went out there and looked for this because this property was an option for a while, just kind of sitting dormant for a while as far as comic books are concerned.
Yep.
And you went out there and looked for it and found one of our friends, Nick from Dynamite Comics.
Yep.
And once you figured that out, because they were doing, I believe they did some kind of Kickstarter thing or whatever, or
they had a backer kit for the reprints of the old Dark Horse books, and I was like, I want to be in on that. Like when I reached out to them, I was like, hey, can we plug this? Can we talk about this? And they were like, yeah, please, for the love of God, tell people about this backer kit. Let's get some early pre-orders for this collection. But then and then I was like, and by the way, but you keyed into the other part of the story, which is that I aggressively pursued this property. When I had the idea, I had a couple of Terminator ideas float in my head. Really, I had this idea for a Terminator crossover that I really wanted to do. And for a long time, it was possible. And I won't get into the details on that one specifically, but I'll say that like around the last decade or so, it became less possible because a larger conglomerate may have acquired certain rights to certain characters and properties. And so as a result, I was just like, I was out of luck. And I was lamenting to my friends about it. And I'm like, I can't believe I can never tell that story. And they were like, why don't you just pull the guy out of that and make it a Terminator story all by itself? And I was like, I guess it's possible. We could tell a story about Terminator by itself. But yeah, I contacted, because Dark Horse used to have a license. I contacted Dark Horse. I was like, hey, do you guys know what's going on with the license? Boom Studios, etc. I got so close that, and I reached out to Dynamite, but obviously they were working on the backer kit, and clearly they were like obliged not to talk about whether they had rights and so forth. And I'm sure they were probably putting them out at the same time. Yeah. So they had to tell me no as well. So I actually found out who was the license holder for Terminator, and I was like, how much would it cost for me to license Terminator? Like, that's how far I went to get to it. Because I was amazed. And that's actually what taught me about like licensing and how, you can license Terminator, but you can't license like Terminator. You can license this movie, this concept, this idea. Like there are certain groups that can only license like sequels and parts of it. So that taught me that really opened my eyes to licensing as well. And the fact that I ain't self-publishing any Terminator books anytime soon. Yeah. Not with the fees and that associated with that. But then thankfully, I saw an ad for the backer kit on Instagram of all places. I was like, oh, it's there. And so I reached out and I was like, can I help with promotion for this? And by the way, no obligation. I'm not. This is not contingent on anything. I happen to dabble. I've written before. I've self-published, unfortunately. It's all self-publishing. But if you're willing to take a chance on a poor schlub from Jersey to tell a story about a robot that kills from the future, I'm your guy. And they were like, well, let's think about it. So I had to send them some PDFs of my original stuff, which unfortunately is sadly out of print and unavailable colloquially. And maybe one day we'll get those books out there again. I'm working aggressively towards getting at least our old webcomic into print. But But in the meantime, actually, it's funny. The good people at Dynamite have read more of my books than probably most of humanity at this point. And so as a result, they looked at it and they were like, this is in English. It isn't incoherent. It's got, and also because when you're self-publishing, it's not just I wrote a script and I figured it out. Like I had to find artists. I had to, give artists, an opportunity to like sketch and try and see if they were a good fit. If they could do sequentials, give notes and suggestions, and find inkers for those pencilers and colorists, and contact printers, and basically be a one-man publishing house.
Yeah.
And that's why, by the way, folks out there who are looking to like make your own comics or to get into the industry, like they always tell you, and I've said this a million times, I used to make a bunch of videos about it, where it's like, how do you get into the industry, or at least how do you self-publish? And it's about self-publishing. They tell you, make your own book. Like, rather than you wanting to tell your Batman story, think about a story that is in your heart that you've always wanted to tell, and like see if you can tell it yourself, like without any of the intellectual property jargon. Make your own stuff and see if that will catch eyes. And it proves to the other publishers who have those properties, hey, like you can tell a story, you can be original, and you can be trusted with their properties. It remains to be seen if I can be trusted with Terminator, but certainly that'll be up to the audience. But I'm hopeful because I love this franchise and I love these characters, and I'm excited to put my name on it in some way.
Yeah, I can tell. So, Sal, we're going to get into your ComicPop YouTube channel and a little bit more about you in a little bit, but I still want to stay on the Terminator. So, what is your role? So, I mean, you're doing the backup story, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
It goes over 5 issues, and it's a couple pages per issue. One question I wanted to ask about that, is it using Luke Sparrow? Is he doing the artwork as well for you, or is it someone else?
No, Luke Sparrow's doing Declan Shalvey's main book, and he's got plenty to draw already.
Yes.
But in fact, Colin Craker, the colorist of Luke Sparrow's work on the main series, is an artist in his own right. Nice. And having seen his sequentials and his cover work, dude's great, and it's awesome. And so they suggested, hey, what about Colin? And so I thought he'd be amazing. I agreed, and so they got Colin to work on it. So Colin Craker's actually doing my story, which also will give a kind of visual synergy with the main story, because there'll be this kind of, obviously the coloring will be similar because Colin will be doing it himself, but also, there'll be this kind of visual consistency between the two stories, even though they couldn't be, they're in the same wheelhouse, they have the same kind of tone, but I'm not mucking with Declan's story. Declan's telling his book, and I'm telling my little tiny Terminator story that's happening around the same time, or in the same concept, because of course we're dealing with time travel, so it can't be certain which time we're in right now.
So, like, let's talk about some limitations and ideas that you have. So, obviously, with Declan Shalvey being the main writer in the book, you can't go too far into the wild as far as like another area. My original idea would probably be something like, oh, the Terminator was sent back in time, they screwed up, and he's now with dinosaurs, or he's on the Mayflower or whatever.
Yeah,
it doesn't fit. That's
Let me tell you, man,
fit the story with Declan. So there's
that dinosaur story. Let me tell you something. You and I are on the same page, because while we were hashing out ideas, I was like, Terminator Rex, and they were like, absolutely not. And they were like, by the way, that's dope, but it doesn't fit thematically with what we're trying to do here. It'll be too weird. It'll be too out there. But yes, that was, you and I are on the same page. No, like, something happens. They screw up. We get sent back to the Jurassic era. Then he fights dinosaurs for 10 pages. I mean, like, I don't know about you, I'd buy that book.
Oh yeah.
But and who knows? You know what I mean. But as far as this story is concerned, I know I had a completely different story that was pitched, and I've written, I want to say 6 or 7 pitches for this book, and for this backup just by itself. My first one was too big, because I wrote a pitch for a Terminator series, and I was like, any story really can be condensed. Like, we could do that whole thing in 10 pages, but the editor disagreed, and he was like, this is too big. And I don't think, and I think it might get away from you. And I'm like, that's what an editor does. Thank you so much. So, I managed to hash out those. And by the way, pitch writing is a tough business as well.
Yeah.
I've seen people do it, on YouTube and stuff, and it seems easy, but once you're in an elevator with somebody and they say go, it's like it's another matter entirely. And I want to thank my partner in crime. I have a show on my podcast channel called All Stars with writer Joshua Williamson, and that dude has given me so much help and advice and guidance when it comes to the inner workings of the industry and how best to navigate it. And one of the most valuable things he gave me was he gave me his pitches that he used, and he's like, just this is the format I like to use. Maybe it works for you, but that allowed me to kind of like morph my concepts into something that was much more trim and coherent and deliberate, and it gave the publisher exactly what they needed. All the information they needed was right here in black and white and perfect, like short, concise detail. So I wrote 7 pitches for that, and they went through it. They approved one. I wrote a script. I rewrote the script. I rewrote the script. I sent it off. They liked it. We were off to the races, and then there was some discussion about, like, wait a minute, it doesn't fit with what Declan's doing. It's a good story. We'll put that over here. Can you fit it within this concept? And I was like, absolutely. I mean, this is the job, right? It's writing, it's creating. So I came up with a bunch of new pitches, sent those off. They read them. Now with Declan being more involved, which I think was really a huge help, because Declan's driving the book. It's his baby. So having his approval, having his suggestions, really, I feel like made it more real. And certainly it'll help to make the book sing better. But as a result, they approved one of those pitches, and then I got to work on that one and got the script out, and we were good to go. But I feel like I went off the beaten path. What was your actual question?
No, that was great. So I remember I talked to Jim Shooter one time, and he told me a story about Stephen King, and he had Stephen King come on board to write a couple pages for that the Heroes for Hope book or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And he was like, I only need 2 pages. And then Stephen King gave him 500 pages.
And what do you do with that, right? You don't throw them out. You don't tell them to rewrite them. You just put them someplace else.
Exactly. So that leads me to my next question. Is 10 pages enough for what you want to do? Or are you just going to keep on submitting ideas, knowing that Dynamite has a license, and hope that they say, you know what, maybe they need a Terminator 2 book?
Oh yeah, I mean, yes. In my case, I the fact that I had another story that they liked enough to be approved and said, don't throw this out, maybe we'll use it again someday, gives me hope. Yeah. But of course, it really is at the end of the day, like, about if the book sells, which of course, like, I'm writing coattails, so the book's gonna sell. But my hope is that if I can help in any way, give it a little bit of boost. Maybe, and word of mouth is high enough for people, like, this was like, I've like, for yourself, and you're an accomplished content creator yourself. You have an amazing audience as well. My audience has been so vociferously supportive and so kind and so just incredibly, like, uplifting.
Yeah.
But if they also dig it, then we're off to the races. I mean, I hope so anyway. Certainly, if word of mouth is high, people dig the story, they want more, and they want to see what that other one was. Keep telling people, keep sending in the letters, keep tweeting, keep telling them it's cool when it comes out, which of course is October 9th. But yeah, I would hope that if we get through this first project together, that there's more. I would love that. I would love to have more than 10 pages, but I find, I don't know about you, but, like, I love restrictions. I've always said that, like, editorial restriction is both a burden and a blessing, because it does create actual limitations on what you can and cannot do.
Yeah.
But it gives you the opportunity to flourish within those confines and maybe get something you never would have thought of as a result. Famously, there's a creator, Tom King. Most of his stories were other people's pitches. Like, people going, oh, can you do a Human Target story? Can you do a thing about Supergirl? Can you tell us a Penguin story? And we need you to, we're thinking about doing something with Watchmen. Can you do something with Rorschach? Some of his best effing work is from suggestions from outside. These aren't things that are like, I have a song in my heart and it has to be told and it's about so and so, you know. These are all outside suggestions. So I'm thrilled with the 10-page limit, only in as much as I can keep it trimmed too. Like I can only put the dope stuff in there. You know, I want to have the room and the space to elaborate, explore, build characters up, but there is something fun and challenging and hopefully exciting and impressive about introducing you to a couple of characters in a page or two, and you understand them completely and you enjoy them and you want to see where they go and you care about their struggle. You hope that they don't die, you know, that kind of thing. These are the options and the opportunities that I've been given thanks to this 10-page thing. I hope certainly that they read well. You know, as far as I'm concerned, I wrote 10 pages. I've read all 10 pages, and I'm going to read them when I get them. But as far as the reader's concerned, for the most part, you're going to be reading them 2 pages at a time per issue. I hope that the way that it's structured and the way that it's written, it maintains your attention and interest every time you open or you finish Declan's story and keep going to mine, and that when it is all together, at the very least, when you have all 5 issues and you can read them all at once, that it reads really well that way too. But that's something that I'm like less familiar with. You know, I don't normally read too many backups. Not to say that I don't read them, but it's more like I don't see a lot of them anymore. So
Sure.
when I when I prepared for this one, I was kind of like, well, let's just focus on telling a 10-page story and then see if that translates 2 pages at a time. I hope it does. I think it will.
So you brought up a couple things here, and I just want to address them. You said that you're kind of feel like you're riding on the coattails of Declan Shelby, which is a great guy. I've had him on the channel, a really great guy. Thundercats is a great book and a bunch of other stuff as well.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to seeing what he does with the Terminator. But you also mentioned your audience.
Yes.
And the support you get from them. And I actually have a quote from one of your fans that I found on a message board. And I just want to read this to you word for word. Sure. They said, buying this solely because Sal from ComicPop is writing the backup story.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of those that are on there. And your audience is very dedicated. They've enjoyed the years of content that you put out on YouTube. And now they get to see your passion come to a page, come to a book, you know. And that's pretty awesome. So to have that support from your audience and to see comments like that, that has to feel pretty good, right?
Oh, it's I mean, it's humbling. It's so rewarding. I every day I wake up and I thank all that is created for the audience that I have, because they're so kind and supportive and discerning. And I just hope that I can deliver, because this is not for me. This is my first comic book. You know, I've written 6 or 7 different books with like bold swings and, you know, breathtaking art that most folk have never seen. Maybe they'll never see it. But that is, and those were very intimidating to put out there into the world, and hope, because every time you do it, you hope that that'll be the thing that, you know, launches your career or gets people interested in you as a concept. And I feel like this is really the first time most people are going to see me being creative, despite the fact that, like, you know, as you know, content creation itself is inherently creative. I got to come up with something and be spontaneous and build something for people to consume entertainment wise. So I feel like that is being creative, but in a very different way, but in a very familiar way. You know, the audience that watches ComicPop reads comics.
Yeah.
And they know me because I have a discerning palate and I'm very, you know, opinionated, and it really is going to be rubber meets road, money where mouth is kind of situation here, even though it's going to be within these very stringent limitations. I mean, Terminator, like it or, you know, however you want to interpret it, it is a bit of a niche brand. I think it's like top 3, top 5, like brands, like concepts, as far as sci-fi action movies or just in general. But you know, it takes some doing, and so it's asking a lot for people to see this first time writer, for people to try out Terminator maybe for the first time in their lives. I've never heard in my life more times people have said, I've never seen the Terminator, than in the last couple of months.
That's crazy.
I know, because I'm like, I am like, I there's an endoskeleton under me.
Yeah.
It's it's a little weird.
I just watched Judgment Day like a week ago.
Oh, well,
Just
sure.
because it's such an easy movie to watch and enjoy.
Yes, yeah, no, it was August 29th, which of course is my Wi-Fi password. It's I celebrate it every year. I was actually in a trivia contest once a couple of years ago, and I couldn't believe it. But they said, "When is Judgment Day?" And I was just August 29th, 1997, and the crowd was like, he didn't even finish the sentence.
Yeah,
and I was like, I've never been asked that question. But as far as the audience is concerned, I just hope that I can deliver. Like I genuinely tried, and it is within a bunch of interesting provisions. It's 10 pages, it's Terminator. It has to be within this kind of like time frame. It has to be within these circumstances. It's an original story. It's 2 pages at a time. Oh, it's only 10 pages long. So like there's a lot of asterisks associated with like Sal's first comic book.
Sure.
But it is Sal's first comic book.
Yeah.
Published by an actual, hailed publisher with a fan favorite, celebrated, top tier brand. So there's a lot riding on it for me, at least as far as like my I don't know, word, because it's going to be questioned, and I know there's going to be people who read it who don't like it, and I hope that they bought it, but also I hope that I think that that's great, only in as much as then it will hopefully be, creatively satisfying. Because people, the worst you can do is say, it was fine, or I didn't really care.
Yeah.
Love it, hate it. That means I got a reaction out of you. And I hope that I can get that with this. But I'm, when I see those comments, and occasionally I do, and I've gotten a lot of unsolicited, support from the audience, and it's been incredibly wonderful and satisfying. But I also hope they like it, and I hope that they like it because it's cool, not because I wrote it necessarily. I hope come for the me, but stay for the story if you want. That's my hope. I genuinely do hope they I just want them to like it. I just want them to think it's cool as I do anyway.
There you go. Well, before we move on to some other topics, let's just go over a little bit of details about the Terminator. Comes out October 9th. Obviously brought to you by Dynamite Publishing. I believe FOC is the middle of this month, like the 16th. Is that?
Yep, that's FOC is the 16th. That means final order cutoff. That's the last date that your comic book store can pre-order the book, so they know how many copies to stock in their stores. So if you want to make sure you get a copy, make sure you tell your shop before 9/16. But it will be on sale next to Absolute Batman on October 9th.
Very cool. Very cool. So everyone, please check that out. Also, there'll be a link down below. You can check out Dynamite's website, more information. There'll be the previews link as well, so you can go to previews and order that, whatever you want to do. So, Sal, thank you for that. Let's switch topics right here. Let me talk to you about your YouTube channel that you're famous for, ComicPop. I mean, you got a multitude of YouTube channels. It's not just ComicPop. It's ComicPop Returns. It's a handful of other ones that you're involved in. It's pretty awesome. It's almost like its own network.
That's kind of the approach, because the way that YouTube has operated. In the beginning, I was like, oh well, we'll be one-stop shopping. Come to ComicPop, you get all this stuff. And then YouTube was like, no, you go to YouTube channels for one particular show at a time. And I'm like, that's insane. So we split off, and because of that, we had to diversify. We had to be like, this is a channel, this is a network now. We have a video game plays channel. Yeah. ComicPop Plays. We got the podcast channel, which I just arbitrarily called ComicPop Returns. Zadarsky made fun of me about it. He's like, and then we'll call it ComicPop and Robin, and then we'll call it ComicPop Forever. Like, but yeah, it's I have a number of channels. Thankfully, it's all the same consistent people. Though you'll find on our podcast channel a few extra faces on that channel. Like it's a lot more interviews and surprises on that channel.
Sure. So I want to talk about your ComicPop channel and kind of the main videos that you do on there when you're sitting there on the couch with your friends.
Yes.
And I really enjoy that, and I'll tell you why. Okay. Doing interviews like this, where someone's on the other side of the country, these are great. Okay. Yeah. But sitting down next to your friends and having a conversation. I used to do a show called Coffee and Comics before I started traveling 3 years ago with my buddy Bob. And he came over, he lived in the neighborhood. We had a set, we sat down, we did this thing, and it was so much fun. There is something special when your buddy is sitting right next to you, and
Yes,
your other buddy's sitting on the other side of you, and you get to have a conversation about something you guys are passionate about.
absolutely.
Was that the goal from the very beginning? Man, let's all get together and do this together.
It's funny because like that's what it is now, and that's what it's been for years. It has been like, let's sit down, let's have some fun, let's make something together.
Yeah.
I know that in the beginning when I decided to make YouTube videos, I was inspired by a bunch of different YouTube channels that were just like, they looked, at the end of the day, the consistent factor between all of them was they looked like they were having fun.
Yeah.
And I wanted to provide that level of fun to an audience that was looking for something that we bring to the table. And I was very lucky, and I'm very narcissistic enough to think that like my friends are some of the coolest people in the world. And so I was like, these guys and gals are all so funny and so introspective and so interesting and so insightful. If I just put the camera on them, magic will happen, because magic happens every day that I spend with them. And I thought that's the way to do it, because I'm this thing. I want to do it. They are it. So what I'll do is I'll film them and then elicit the magic. And they were like, that's your dream. Like, you want to do all that stuff. We'll participate because we love you and because we think this is fun. But like our pursuits aren't necessarily YouTube. So I realized right away, I was like, I got to put the camera on me, and then I got to make sure I pull my friends into. And so that was the beginnings of ComicPop, back when we were a different name, and it was like algorithmically terrible and detrimental to our entire brand. But and we're still recovering from it today. But like bringing them in and replicating, or rather capturing, the magic that takes place when the cameras are off is so rewarding, because when it hits the right audience or audience member, it hits them where they live, and that's seeing that happen, or seeing the result of that, like when we do in-person meetups, or when we see comments like the kind you pointed out, that's something that like it's not necessarily what I was pursuing, because I didn't even know what I was looking for. It's just like, I want to make things, I want to shoot stuff, I want to edit, I want to create and talk. And I think that in the beginnings, podcasts were mostly very carefully curated. You got to cut out all the breaths, all the uhs, and it turns out like, well, first of all, that is devastatingly too much work. Like, it's just, you go through an hour-long podcast, takes 6 hours to cut out all those moments. Then you listen to it, it sounds really weird and robotic, because it doesn't sound conversational. And you yourself aren't used to it. So you don't self-censure the uhs and the breaths and the long pauses and stuff. But having all that experience only helped to iron out those issues. And I realized very quickly into that whole process, no, sit with your friends. Just if you bring in people that you already have a natural camaraderie with, half the work is done for you.
It's easy.
So much easier. So but we certainly do set out now to just continue, to be like, hey, we don't get to see each other as often as we can. We're older, lives happen, women are entering their lives and they have to go off with them, and for whatever reason. And but we meet every week. And we sit down and we have an amazing time. We'll laugh and joke around for like 2-3 hours before we shoot. We'll laugh and joke, 3 hours after the show's over. And it's why we can only really shoot like one show at a time, because we just don't have time, because we're laughing too much, which is a wonderful problem to have. But there is something really, really electric about in-person moments. It's why I've always tried to finagle some of our friends from across the internet to come to the studio. Like, now that we have a space and we have all this room, and it kind of like helps to, make you more excited about it. You see all this stuff, all these lights and cameras and toys and action figures and comic books, and you're like, wow, like we're doing something. I would like to try and capture that and see what we elicit from some of the folks that we do have. Like, I got a pal, I mentioned him earlier, Joshua Williamson. Some of these comic book creators who are, based in the area. Would be nice to have them come by. My old co-host, I got, a dude from Canada, Cape Joel. Would love to have Joel in the studio, just see what we make out of that experience. And you can tell, like, I've had Joel on my show, 4 or 5 years more. This way, we have one episode of Back Issues that Joel was on when he was at New York Comic Con, and the dynamic is completely different. because we're in person.
Yeah. Well, hey man, I travel, so I would love to come by and
Totally, yeah.
do the studio someday. You had mentioned that you kind of mentioned this, but like when you do a video and stuff and you edit it and put it out and stuff, there's all the other footage that people will never see.
Yes.
And just the blast. And that's the one thing, like the video that me and my friend Bob did in person, you know, they were like an hour and a half long that we upload, but there's like another hour and a half or 2 hours of footage that people will never see that I went through and edited out.
Yep.
And man, it was such a good time, man. We laughed and cried and just, you know, we're a little bit more free, I guess you'd say, as far as our language.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Depending on YouTube and stuff like that. But it was such a good time, man. And people ask me, it's like, hey, you know, you're going to be traveling now. And I stopped doing that show because I hit the road. Like I said, it's been almost 3 years. And people are like, hey, why don't you guys do like a remote thing similar to what we're doing right here? And I said, it's just not the same.
No.
It'd be a disservice to what we did because of how much fun we did or had. I just didn't want to do it. And he felt the same way. He was like, yeah, it just wouldn't be the same if we weren't sitting next to each other, you know, and catching those cues, you know, that we both have and stuff, you know, living in the moment. And so I just kind of said, it ain't going to happen. Whenever I go back to the Oregon, that's where I'm from. Yeah. We do try to do a video here and there if he's got the time. It's always a blast sitting next to him.
And and I'll bet you find like, oh my God, like we're actually having that experience. Like we didn't miss any time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's like you were just there yesterday. A year's gone by. I think there was a year between our two episodes. Like episode 152, a year later we did 153. And it was like we've been together the whole time. We didn't skip a beat, you know, and it was great. You had mentioned a creator. He's a friend of mine as well, Joshua Williamson. He's actually from Oregon. We actually my home base is probably about 20 minutes away from his house.
Oh, no kidding.
I've known him for many years. The funny thing is, last time I was in Oregon, we were supposed to go get coffee together, and I had to cancel on him. I couldn't do it. I felt really bad. I couldn't do it. But we end up seeing each other more around the country than we do in our own home state.
Isn't that funny how that works out? It's so true. Yeah. Like, I mean, I should see a lot of people elsewhere, like in our hometown, and yet here we are. Yeah. Here we are in like in a city I would never normally be in.
Exactly. Like I think I've seen him in Chicago and New York and all the fan expos that he does, you know, because I do that tour and stuff. And then like last time I saw him, I think he was just walking down the street with his daughter in Portland.
Oh, cool.
Like, oh, hey man, what's up? And we sat there and talked for a little while and stuff like that. Nice. Really, really great guy, man. That guy's plate is so cool. And I'm like, how do you do all this stuff, you know? And I remember when I canceled to go get coffee with him, he's like, I was probably going to cancel anyway because I got so much to do. I go, yeah, I figured you did. Yeah. So he's such a nice guy and, you know, very kind, and that goes a long way, and his work is amazing that he does. But I want to talk about comic book creators because you and I have had the opportunity to meet quite a few of them over the years. We've interviewed a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Is there ever been any of them where you were, let's just say, nervous to sit down and talk to you? I mean, did you have some butterflies at all? Is there a couple of names you'd like to mention?
I mean, honestly, every single one at first, like when the first time I ever talked to them, you know, and it was always nervous. I was always like, like I was always like a one encouraging word from a loved one away from canceling, because I was just like, it's easier if I just don't do it. Yeah, especially in the earlier days, especially when I like was bold enough to ask, you know. But I mean, like getting to talk to Josh, Tom King, Scott Snyder was another one that was like I don't know. Todd McFarlane was a big one for me I'm nervous every time we talk, and I've talked to him about 3 or 4 times now, and I'm like, and now I saw him at New York Comic Con, and I don't expect anyone to remember me, like really, like audience members, creators, you know, ex-girlfriends. I don't expect anyone to remember me. And but through a situation with CBR, I was given an opportunity to like interview Todd for them, and he was like, "Hey Sal, good to see you again. Like, what's going on?" Like, you know, he remembered me, and in a way where he was like, we had a conversation, we talked about this was a lot of fun, like, and it's like why I approve this experience. I'm like, that's amazing. Like, I don't expect that I have any kind of impact, and I appreciate any time that like there's a camaraderie that we've built Garth Ennis was another surprise that like I was
Yeah.
like, nah, I don't know if I could do this. Brian Michael Bendis, like I mean, really any mover and shaker at this point is like something where I'm like, wow. But then sometimes I find that like I'll get comfortable or relaxed before I do an interview, whether it's with a familiar person or with someone brand new, and there'll be a moment like right before I start doing the interview with especially with someone new, with someone I don't know necessarily really well, and I'll go, hey, don't get too comfy, man. You don't know these people. And I was like, oh yeah, oh no. And so it all comes right back, which is why I make sure I like write down a few notes to make sure I've got something just as a lifeline. Because when it comes to people that I'm on the show, like I think Josh has been on the show so much. We have a show now. Like he's probably the most consistent guest I've had. It's him, Jim Zub, and Tom King. I think they've been on the show the most. So it's with them. I don't really need a list. I don't need anything. I could, because it's just the most of the show at this point is just watch these two talk about comic books and whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky that that's a thing I can do for a living. Like that's a very, very fortunate circumstance. But with anybody else, even if I have a rapport with them like Scott or Todd or anybody like that, I have a list just in case, like I just blank. That happened with me recently. I was talking to Declan Shalvey, a person I'm literally working with on a book, and we were talking, and I just there was just something missing. I was just like, I had something in my mind about that I wanted to talk about. It was a conversational, it was switch, and it just hit me, and I'm like, hey man, I'm sorry. And I had to be an adult about it. Like and you know, if I was a kid, if I was in my 20s or younger, I would have just died. I would have just ended the call and never talked to him again. But like, because I'm an adult and I've done this a million times, I had to say, hey man, I don't know what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Let's just take 2 seconds and let me check my notes.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course you do that. You do that in a business meeting. You do that anywhere. But, you know, because we talk for a living, because we're personalities for a living, it seems like that's unthinkable. But, I was disappointed in myself. I'm like, why am I letting there be such much dead air? It wasn't live. You know, so folks at home never saw it. But but I was like, wow, that still happens. You know, and it wasn't Deck's fault. That was all me. That was just like I wanted to switch topics to this specific thing. I couldn't remember what that specific thing was, and then I had to wait. But yeah, when it comes to nerves, I mean, like, and there's some folk I have still been talked to, and I feel like if I was ever to chat with like Grant Morrison, I'd probably be like, I'd probably cancel like 2 seconds before it started. Or any number of creators. How about you?
I've had a couple of those as well. I mean, the one, and this is, you know, she's worked with Dynamite on her book, Elvira. So I had her on the channel, and I was a whole different type of nervous with Elvira.
Oh,
sure. That's another world. And then I had a failed attempt at an interview with Rob Liefeld. That when I was very nervous, I remember my daughter looking at me like, "Why are you so nervous?" I go, "This is Rob Liefeld." She's like, "Who's that?" Go, never mind. But he comes on the channel. We were doing something similar to what me and you were doing right now.
Yeah.
And he couldn't get his camera or his mic to really work that well. And you could tell the frustration was mounting.
Oh, sure.
And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, and it just, we never did get to do the interview. It just failed miserably and it never happened. He could see me, he could hear me just fine, but on his end, it just didn't work out. So that was the two things. You had mentioned Tom McFarlane. I've known Todd since I was about 15 years old.
Yeah.
I say this all the time because I love bringing this up, but his wife, Wanda, was my teacher in high school.
No kidding.
In Clackamas, Oregon, and Todd would come to our school after school and teach us how to draw Spider-Man every now and then with a very small group of kids, like 5 of us sitting there with Tom McFarlane, and Todd showing us, hey, this is how I draw Spider-Man. Oh yeah, by the way, there's this new character I want to make with my own book. You'll know about it coming up, which was Spawn.
Yeah.
So I've known him for a little while. I don't know if he'd remember me. We've talked a few times.
Yeah.
But you mentioned it, and the one thing I want to say about Todd really quick, it just looks like this time in his life, he's having a lot of fun. I mean, he just looks like, ever since Spawn 300 hit, he just looks like this part of his life he's really enjoying. Not to say he wasn't enjoying the past, but man, you look at him right now, and he's like, I'm fully embracing everything that this has accomplished, and I love every moment I have with it right now. And I think anyone who's watched him over the last few years has noticed it. I know I have. So
oh yeah, no, he's
really good
at like
to have
he's at like the Nick Cage phase of his career where it's like,
yes, that's a perfect example.
I don't apologize, and maybe I might be doing my best work. You know, it's so fun. It's. I mean, you grew up with him. You know, like the idea of him being like, we're probably never gonna do a Spawn Spider-Man crossover. To him actually drawing one for one of the previews magazines, like just being like, or the collector's guide. I was like, he never would have done that.
Yeah.
And and it's always the other guys. But I'm like, I love how excited he is and how down. I mean, like the fact that we even got a Batman Spawn crossover for me was like, miraculous and cool. And he's just like, I'm just cool. You could tell like he's a kid at heart. Like he just has fun. He's like, well, as long as it's dope, as long as it's cool, it's such like the most important thing for him is like, this is cool. As long as it's cool, we can keep going,
I think he's fully embraced the I think he kind of probably says to himself, I am the comic book ambassador now, as far as the name, and that's what it is. We've had Stan Lee, we've had these other people around that have since passed.
Yeah, he should be. I mean, like, and he's being a good rep. He's like, I wish, you could tell like his big love right now is toys. Like, I wish he would hype up comics a little more.
Yeah.
But he's, he's doing great work right now for DC and for Spawn, and his Kickstarter just launched, and it's great. I'm thrilled for him.
So let me go a different direction, and you don't have to name names.
Sure.
Like I said, I know we've met a lot of creators over the years, and you probably more so than myself. Is there been a creator where it kind of let you down? Kind of like, oh man, I held this person up on a pedestal. I met him. I was like, oh man, that was disappointing. Like I said, you don't need to name names. I have
sure.
Myself.
When it comes to interactions at cons, yes. Like I could say that I've been in situations at conventions where I've gotten something signed, and I was like, that's a shame that was not as cool or as exciting, or they were ruder than I would have liked.
Yes.
But when it came to the show, I've never had anyone on where I was like, boo, that sucks, or they were a jerk. Like I've never had anybody be a jerk on the show. The only thing even resembling that, and I've told the story before, is Garth Ennis. And I will say only the reason why I mention it is because Garth, like, he got me. He got me good. He pulled a real Irishman on me, where he was like, we talked before, we set up the interview through a third party, because it's like, I don't know Garth, I'm not gonna call him. And we were promoting Sarah, which is a book I can easily promote. I love Sarah from TKO. It's such a good, gorgeous, amazing, cool, weirdly reserved for Garth book. And before we started the show, I was like, hey, listen, before we get started, I want to thank you so much for being here. I want to tell you, like right at the top of the show, I want to treat this more like a conversation. I don't want this to be like an interview where I just ask you questions and you answer me. Like, I want it to be like, if you feel like you want to go down a road with a conversation or a story, the audience loves that stuff. That's what I live for. I want it to feel like we're just kind of having a conversation, like you and I are just chatting. He's like, right, I got it, no problem. And then we start, and I'm like, so Garth, we're doing this. We're having this show. Fantastic. You're writing Sarah for TKO. Yeah, that's right. And I was like, how's that going? He's like, it's going really good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, all right. And I guess that's what his way of being like, you're not just going to get the ideal version of me. You're going to have to earn it by doing something. Like you're going to have to try. And so I had like, and that was where, thank God, I had my safety net. But it was around a time when I was like, I think I'm doing a pretty good job with these interviews. I think I could probably do it, But I was like, well, you know what? I'll do myself a favor. I'll write a few, softball questions for Garth just in case. But I think I've got this. And then Garth's like, nope. And I'm like, so Etrigan is a character you seem to have a lot of affinity for. Let's talk about that. He's like, okay, we could talk about that, I suppose. And eventually, like you could tell the latter half of the show, he started to be like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like, this guy isn't a total waste of my time. He's not a jerk, because he doesn't know. And I completely respect that. But he really got me, where I was like, it's more like he kept me on my toes and taught me a valuable lesson about being an interviewer. But that was where I was like, when he hit me with the no answer, or with the one sentence answer, I was like, gonna make me work for this one, huh? Okay. I see where we're going with this.
Yeah.
But as far as having any creator interviews, I can't think of a one where I was like, uh-oh, like this isn't going well, or this guy's a jackass. Like it's never happened. I'm honest, and I know this sounds like it's just me being like, oh, embarrassment of riches, but no, genuinely, I was like, I'm surprised to tell you that I really have like had a wonderful experience doing this show. When it comes to comic book creators, now being a fan and going to cons, that's a little bit of a different story. And I've told a couple of those stories before, but let's not reinforce them.
There you go. I've had a couple instances myself. A couple different come to mind. I was hosting a panel for Larry Hama and Tim Seeley.
Oh, cool.
And this is right before G.I. Joe was coming out from Image. And I'd never met Larry Hama before. I was really excited to meet Larry Hama because I was like, man, G.I. Joe, that's my thing. I love that stuff. And I remember going on stage with him and starting to do those questions. And I got the similar answers what you got. Okay. Nope. Yep. Thank God for Tim Seeley. Stepped up and kind of filled the room, and stuff like that. Because Larry was, I don't know if he was just having a bad day or didn't want to be there or whatnot, but it was very, the one word answer is, and here I'm excited to talk about the new G.I. Joe book coming out like a month away. And he really wasn't giving me much to go on. So I was up there struggling for the 45 minutes that we were up on stage. And
that's gotta be weird.
Yeah, and you're in front of a live audience right then and there. And I've done many panels. I've done Scott Snyder panels. I like doing Scott Snyder panels with him. I've done 2 or 3 with him, and those were a blast. So
no, that's something I'm very thankful I've never had. I used to act in high school and college, so like I know what it's like to flub a line in front of an audience or be in an awkward position where someone's giving you nothing. I don't know if I've had that necessarily on stage, and I'm thankful for that in terms of this career. But I did. I can say this. I hosted the Evening with Kevin Conroy panel at the now defunct Keystone Comic-Con in Philadelphia, and he was kind of surprised there was an MC. When we met backstage, they're like, "Oh, they asked me to do this," and he's like, "All right. I mean, you don't have to. I'll take care of it." And I'm like, "No. I'm like that way. You can just relax." And so it gave him an opportunity to relax, and he owned it. Held court, owned the whole thing, made my job essentially rendered me completely useless and unnecessary. But I was able to introduce him, and it's funny because I had a whole introduction ready in my head. And then he just came out and was like, "I'm Batman." I'm like, "Well, I'm not gonna push it."
Yeah.
I had one zinger where not a zinger, but I had one moment that I got to do with him where there was an audience member question where they were an aspiring voice actor and they wanted to know if he had any tips for how to warm up for the job. And clearly she was asking about physically, what do I do? Do I do I do vocal exercises? Do I drink something? And Kevin went on a 45-minute long story about emotional voice range and what characters, what episodes of the Batman show got him to these places, and just completely owned the room, just pulled them in. And then at the end of the story, he's like, and I was like, "So no tea or anything?" And he's like, "I'm sorry." I'm like, "So not a tea or a lozenge?" And he's like, "Oh, no, tea with honey and lemon is my go-to." And I was like, "Okay."
A lot of these guys, you get on stage with them or you do an interview, a lot of it is you just kind of have to wrangle them in because some of them, I know that. If I'm hosting a panel with Jim Shooter, my job's done before I even take the stage. I just go on stage and say, "Hey, Jim Shooter." That's right,
ladies and gentlemen, Jim Shooter, and then you see the sign that's 2 minutes.
Then I'm trying to, or Chris Claremont. I've done panels for Chris. That's a chore, man. Getting him, I got in trouble one time because I could not get him off the stage, and the next people up were Jane and Silent Bob.
Oh my God!
Had the get him off the stage, and I could not get him off the stage.
Yeah.
For the life of me, that's just kind of how he is. But another guy I just want to recommend. He's the only guy I really the incomparable Howard Chaykin. That guy. Oh, I get to see him again here coming up, man. I love the guy, but I still got issues with him, man. He's he was hitting on my mom last time we saw him. And I'm like, she's married. and
Right.
you're married.
He's like, I want to be your
So,
dad. Come on,
exactly.
help me
So
out.
Howard Jenkins, he's one of them.
That's
Let's
funny.
move on to something else here, because something I just noticed the other day that you were nominated for a Comic Community Award.
Yeah, that was a really fun surprise, and very
Yeah.
very humbling and kind of them to consider me. There's a group out there called the Comic Book Community Awards, and
Mhm.
they were kind enough to put us in a list of distinction among a lot of different creators out there
Yeah.
for a couple of subjects, which I thought was really nice of them. It was like it was I didn't know until like I got like a tag in Instagram. Somebody was like, hey, your thing. I'm like, huh? And then sure enough, there it was. But yeah, it was really nice. I was like,
Yeah.
what a kind distinction. And a lot of different amazing creators out there
Yeah.
that were also in there. And now it's already, thankfully, all the bloodshed has passed when it comes to like the selection process. Because I told this story just yesterday. The Watch Mojo period, when all the comic book YouTubers were just like fighting each other to get into the top 5.
Yeah.
This is going back like 12 years. It was bloody and it was aggressive, and I don't want to be a part of it ever again. But this was more like, it's you and 4 other guys. I'm like, that I could just say, hey, vote for me if you want, and that's it. So it was great. But and I saw their nomination video, and I was like, wow, look at us up there. It's always weird and fun to see your channel or your stuff on someone else's channel, but not them stealing it, just them being like, here's a thing. And I'm like, really, me? Thank you.
Well, very cool. I've won a couple of awards there. This is the 4th year they're doing it. I got my award here because it's the only one I carry with me. But I won this a couple years ago.
Wow!
Oh
No crap! That's awesome, man.
Lifetime Achievement Award.
Well earned, sir. Yes.
And I'm pretty sure I won it because of the big swing I took for traveling and going on the bus and going around the country. It's kind of a very unique idea that nobody else has really tackled, to be honest.
No, it's true.
And I understand it, but yeah, people can go vote right now. I think the voting goes on for a little while. They had a nomination process. You were nominated with a bunch of others. You have you were one of the top 5 nominated people for the categories and stuff like that. So people can go vote. I'll put a link to it down in the description of the video.
Oh, thank you.
People that want to go vote, but go check it out, because not only do they recognize larger channels like yourself, they also have categories for smaller channels that are just starting, and a whole bunch of different stuff. So please go check it out. If you want to vote for ComicPop, you can, or if you see anyone on there that you enjoy, just follow your heart, man. Vote for the people you like the best,
Exactly.
And enjoy their content. Speaking of content, so is this the ComicPop YouTube channel? Do you do this full time? Is this your full time gig?
This is the job, man. This is the full time gig. Now my wife does work, but she how do I say this? I think we both make the same salary. Like we do, like we support each other. We support the house. We support our lives. Like it's not just like I do this and I have fun and my wife goes to work and she works her ass off. She does that too. But if one didn't work out, we wouldn't starve. Yeah. But yeah, this is the full-time job, man. And it's been going strong for 10 years that I've been doing this for a living. And it's been a dream every day. And I'm incredibly thankful for it.
Was there a specific time when you sat there and said, you know what, this is it? I can turn this into a career, a living. I mean, you had to come to that moment and just say, you know what, I have this other life, whatever you did in the past, but man, I can make this happen, and I'm going to go full swing in this and go for it. What do you remember that moment? I mean,
No, I was working as a teacher at the time, and it was like my that was a rough go where there was a teacher surplus, I guess. It was pre-COVID. And people, it was like 500 people were applying for one English teaching job in the district, and I was applying to like every district in all of the state of New Jersey. Like I'd send out every year I'd send out 500 applications, and then I get like, you could be a special ed support teacher for $17,000 a year, and I'd be like, you're killing me, But I was working. I developed my own curriculum, and I was working on this thing for this private school, and I was working my ass off, and it was a hard, grueling job with in a really thankless environment. And I was doing this on the side, and I was like, I think I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
But this was also at a time where I was like, and I think instead of going, because my parents taught me, you never go, you never quit a job. You go from a job to a job. You always make sure you have that lined up. And this is one of those times where I was like, I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm going to like try to do this more, because I was already doing the show, but or these shows, but I was like, I think I'm going to aggressively pursue this as like a job. Yeah. And so I did, and I left that job and I did this, and every year I made more money than I did the previous year, and it looked like it was feasible. And we were growing, and and eventually blossomed into this. And we don't I owe a lot to like Infinity War and Endgame and the Infinity Saga helping to like drum up interest and support for comics and comic related media. But so today isn't nearly as like exponentially growing as 2015, but sure. But we're still growing every year, and we still make more than we did the previous. So like I consider that a success.
Yeah.
It was definitely like just another miserable day in paradise as a teacher. And I was like, I can't, like, I was like, I am losing it. Like I gotta figure out something else.
Well, that's something that we both have in common, and we both kind of went for the big swing and kind of, went all in.
Yeah.
And it's worked out for you. It's worked out for me. This is my life. This is what I get to do. I enjoy every minute. I'm very grateful. I look in the mirror. I'm like, man, I can't believe I get to do this. I mean, right? This is just like, are you kidding me? I look back 10 years ago where I was like then, working for the man, whatever you want to call it. And now I get to do this. Yeah. It's like, come on, it's like, come on, But, so I'm very, very grateful for all the audience support and everyone. And I'm sure you feel the same way, but much respect for you to, really kind of just like bank on yourself to make it happen, and it's not an easy thing to commit to. Not a lot of people do it all the way in and stuff like that. Maybe they dabble their toes a little bit and it's the side thing, but making that commitment. I remember at one time I was at a panel at Comic-Con, and there was 4 like YouTubers, content creators on the panel, and they're doing a panel about doing YouTube, becoming a YouTuber, and all 4 of them, and no disrespect to any of them there, this was all like their part-time gig, okay, right. And that's what it was. They were just doing it for fun, and I'm like to myself, I'm like sitting in the audience, I'm like, these people are here wanting to find out how to do this for a living, and yet the people on the panel are just doing it for fun, And I asked the question, and I asked all 4 of them when it was time for the Q&A. I said, what is it going to take for you to go all in?
Right. For you to do this for a living.
None of them could really answer my question. They were like, oh, they were just like, and then like, because I told them, I said, because I'm a YouTuber, I went all in and bet on myself, and it worked out. And like I said, no disrespect to them, but like after the panel, people in the audience came up to me.
Oh, sure.
You don't ask me questions.
Well, if you're making it work, what are your secrets? Yeah. Because like that's why you go, right? You go to that meeting. If you're in your position and you go to you see a panel how to make it in YouTube, you're like, this will help me. This will give me some tips and tricks on how to like refine my process. And I'm sure there was something valuable that they gave you, but it sends a message when they say like, I do this for fun, and obviously I do other things because obviously it's impractical to be a YouTuber, which statistically speaking it is. It is, YouTube was created for people to be able to quickly and easily share videos that they took of the zoo with each other. It wasn't meant necessarily to be a career path for people. And so it's like when it works and it's successful, I mean, it's amazing, and it's inspiring in a big bad way. So I feel like that's funny. I've only been on one. I've never been on any like how to be. I've been on YouTuber panels, but only with like my friend, like who got it because he was the comic historian. But I've never been on those other panels where it's like how to do it, like here's some tips and tricks on how to make it happen. So I also try to give it away as much as I can. Like when we do the show, people will ask, and I'm like, here's what I've done. The worst of it is when you're like talking to other people, other peers, and they're like, how do you do it? And I'm like, you do these things, and they don't do it.
Yeah.
They're like, nah, I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, okay, well then don't ask.
Yeah. I get asked the same thing. I actually just the other day, somebody sent me a message saying, hey, I'm new to YouTube. I want to start doing a channel. Do you have any advice? And I said, well, I can share some advice. YouTube is a different beast than it was 7 years ago when I started. So I don't know if my things still work as well as they used to.
Right.
And so I shared a few things, but I also said, here's the deal, man. There's a lot of luck involved as well.
Yeah.
And, I don't think people realize how much luck is involved, to be totally honest, because there's some great content out there.
Yeah.
And nobody gets to see it. And they're checking all the boxes.
Yeah.
But for some reason it just doesn't get shown, and that's the way it's always been. I'm not talking about just comic books. I'm talking about
just
everything on YouTube. I watch a lot of stuff on traveling and van life, the bus life, and I find these videos that are just edited and look great and the title's great and they got 100 views, man. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But it just is what it is. But you know what, man? I kind of want to wrap things up here, Sal. It's been about an hour since we've been going. Let's go back to the Terminator real fast. Like I said, the Terminator is coming out October 9th.
That's right.
We've got the 2 pages. So when you say 2 pages, we're talking front and back. So 2 full pages, not just like 1 page, the front and the back, right?
That's an interesting question. I didn't think about that. I think it's just front and back. I think because it's got to be, because it's 10 pages, and I think it's across the first arc, so it's got to be front and back.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not like 4 pages.
Okay, so we'll just gonna have to wait and see. We don't know. We're not 100% on this.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's 2 pages per issue, so I think it's got to be front and back. Because it's not like, we don't have any hidden pages going on.
Sure.
I don't think.
So October 9th, that's when it comes out. That's when the street date is. As we all know, things do change.
That's true.
Date is not written in stone, but you can go to your comic shop, FOC, the 16th of this month. Let them know that you want a copy or maybe a couple copies. And that way, when it does show up, October 9th, you'll have your copy. You can also go to Dynamite's website as well and a bunch of other things. Declan Shelby, awesome writer. So awesome to see you kind of teamed up with him and stuff. And just the whole team on the project. I'm very excited. Let me ask you one more question before we go.
Sure.
And this is always, when I think Terminator comic book, it's the Dark Horse #1, man, with that guy on the front.
Yes,
and the
absolutely.
colors popping off that thing. I'm from Milwaukee, Oregon, which is where Dark Horse Comics is, man. So I remember when they came out, I was down there in Milwaukee, because they got a big, huge display in the front window with the life-size Predator and Alien and all that stuff. Oh, but man, that cover and that book itself with the colors popping, I remember the hand and all the blood and all that stuff. Do you remember that book?
Hell yeah. Oh yeah, no, I do. I vividly remember that cover. I remember, well, because I'm a kid, I'm watching Terminator for the first time. I read comic books at the exact same time, so I'm like, is there, like, I knew that there was Terminator comics because I also read Wizard, and so there was always in there. But yeah, man, no, I picked up, there's so many books I should not have been reading at the time that I have. Like, I have my first Predator book was Big Game. Mm-hmm. My first Terminator book was that Dark Horse series.
Yeah.
Although I still maintain one of my favorite Terminator books of all time is Terminator 2 Judgment Day Cybernetic Dawn.
Yeah.
From Dan Abnett, which, like, who'd have thought that? But awesome stuff. But yeah, that and of course Dark Horse's Alien book. And there are people, I mean, like, AVP disappointed everybody when it came out in theaters, but there's a special audience that was especially upset because, everybody who saw it was like, oh, that kind of sucks. But there was another smaller group of people who went, that sucks, but I know it could be better because I read it for 20 years.
Sure.
That sucks. Like, but yeah, I loved AVP, and I was prepared. Like, by the time I saw Predator 2, I'm like, Xenomorph Skull, yes. Yeah. But yeah, Terminator, yeah, the Dark Horse book is where it was at, man. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Sal, let's wrap it up, man. Is there anything you want to say before we go?
I want to thank you so much for having me, man. It's always a pleasure, and it's such a great time to be here. And I'm a great admirer of your channel and of your initiative and of your own gumption, your decision to go out there and make it. And I think you're making a fantastic go of it. And I'm thrilled to see what you have next, man.
Well, thanks, Sal. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to running into you again. Are you going to be in Baltimore, or are you guys just going to New York?
I got to skip Baltimore this year. I try to go every year, but this year I've got a wedding the following week, and I want to make sure I'm prepared and not sick or anything. So I gotta gotta avoid that. But New York Comic Con I'll be at, so hopefully we'll see you there. And interestingly enough, and at Zap Comics in Wayne, New Jersey on October 9th, I'm going to be doing a little signing. So if you want to meet me and get me to sign that Terminator book, I'll be at Zap Comics in Wayne, New Jersey, the day that his book comes out.
There you go. Awesome, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I want to thank everyone for watching. Do me a favor. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to live your best life. You know what to do. We'll see you next time. Bye.